Hello everyone, and welcome to Anime Insider. In this video we are discussing Death Note's main protagonist Light Yagami's evils analysis. This story is one of continuity, one that stands out as one of the greatest ever created on this medium. And in its pages we find a young man endowed with the powers of a god, who poses for us an interesting moral dilemma. This story has always been of interest, one that stands out as one of the most important ever made on this medium. And within its pages we discover a young man controlled by a god who poses us a strange moral dilemma. But given the general dilemma Death Note poses to us about whether it's good to kill criminals and the like for the good of society, we'll focus more on that concept. Is Light, although this goal or certainly allows us to make judgments about Light and his actions. So with that in mind, due to the nature of this topic, this video will certainly include some of my personal opinions on certain things, but I have tried to remain objective as much as possible about this concept. Please feel free to challenge whatever you hear in the video below, as this is a complex topic and we can all benefit from different ideas on the subject. Also, since we didn't focus too much on lighting, what you hear in this video is applicable to both manga and anime. But I would say if you haven't read the manga, I recommend you read it because there are things missing from the anime that really add to the story. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Light Yagami is clearly a genius. As the son of the head of the National Police Service, Light took every opportunity to develop his wits. And this can be seen in the frequent compliments he receives from friends, mentors, and loved ones about his achievements at school and national exams, subjects that he is always on top. However, Light wasn't only successful with his intelligence, as he was shown to be exceptionally devoted to learning, quick-witted and resourceful traits that would later help him succeed in his endeavors. Create a new world with Death Note. Now, because Light's father is a member of the police. The ideals of a man in such a position were instilled by Light at an early age, and Light's own values mirror those of his father, and so, naturally, he developed a strong sense of justice. However, what sets Light apart from his father is his view that the world is rotten, a place full of horrible people doing horrible things, and the worst part is that it never changes. Day in and day out the news reports the deeds of criminals who just never seem to stop. Wars that are always being waged and atrocities that seem to be just around the corner. He's not exactly wrong. But rather than deriving his sense of justice from a desire to serve society, it would appear that Light's is derived from his desire to ensure that the bad are punished for their misdeeds, which is a key difference. Therefore, when Light acquires the Death Note, who he is and what he has experienced so far in his short life result in him developing the idea that he must become the one who will change the world for the better by dealing with criminals in the way they should be dealt with. And upon gaining this power, he becomes a much different person, one whose previous sense of justice has caused him to develop the belief that he will be the martyr who will bring ultimate justice to the world. Giving his heart and soul up to do what needs to be done for the sake of humanity. Though to what degree he can claim to hold the title of martyr is debatable, as Light often likens himself to a god who will shape the world anew, which, along with his propensity to use everyone around him in order to accomplish his goals without much regard for their safety or well-being, could indicate that Light was a natural-born narcissist. However, since little is known of who Light was before he obtained the Death Note, it's hard to say if he did or not. It's entirely possible that Light would never have displayed many of the traits he chose after his ascension to Kira had he not obtained the Death Note. And even when we consider who Light is after losing the Death Note midway through the series, we still can't decipher whether those traits are an integral part of who Light is. Again, our exposure to Light uncontaminated by Kira is too limited to know if it really is Light without the Death Note. So with that in mind, Kira can be considered a brand new personality created after Light obtained the Death Note, and that makes a lot of sense. I can't imagine how any of us would react after receiving a tool that not only gives you divine power but also gives you undeniable proof of supernatural powers. Follow the teachings of God and the blessings of the sea will be abundant and there will be no storms. A line is given at the beginning of the anime from an unspecified text summarizing Light's fair view of his own actions. So, although Light is an integral part of Kira, it is impossible to say which part of his personality comes from Light and which part comes from Kira. We know that Light has become far more vindictive, selfish, and unsympathetic. But who can say that these traits weren't available in his personality before his transformation and that his new goal only amplifies them? However, you want to see it, Light can have a personality disorder, such as narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Or maybe he doesn't. I think the answer depends on your own interpretation of his personality and development. Now, as we all know, Light develops his goal of killing criminals to make the world a better place. But it is interesting to note here that the idealistic beliefs that Light displayed after receiving the Death Note could be classified as the result of the innocence of his youth. I imagine that most of the adults who watch this video recall their youth when they had some extreme belief that they grew out of lack of experience and wisdom. And perhaps some of you who are currently in your teens watching this video are wondering if you have such beliefs right now. However, I would like to add that there is nothing wrong with having these ideas when you are young. Unless, of course, they turn into something bad. It's just a fact of life. 6 years have passed since the discovery of Death Note by Light and the end of this story. So how can you assert that his beliefs are the result of the lofty ideals of adolescence? Well, that's because the difference here, compared to yourself or anyone else, is that as you get older for some different reason, you realize that ideas are bigger than your life or wrong or impossible for some reason, and then you gave up those beliefs, while Light has the opportunity to make the impossible a reality. Growing up, do you think you would give up the idea that criminals and wrongdoers deserve to die for the good of the world if you had the chance to make that dream come true? I would say probably not. And Light is no different. But is that a bad idea? Is Light really wrong, and does he deserve to be labeled a bad guy with false beliefs? Well, let's explore that now. So, on the surface, the idea that all criminals should be killed to prevent further crimes from happening due to the immediate threat of death hangs over people's heads if they commit a crime, it seems. As a sound proposition, a classic case of the end justifying the means. But as we dig deeper into this idea, cracks start to appear. The first problem I can see is the problem that judicial authorities around the world are constantly dealing with in convicting or executing innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Light executes people he knows through the media or other means. And the criminals who appear in these reports are often presented soon after being arrested for their crimes. This therefore means that a significant portion of the people he killed were people whose guilt was unproven. And most likely some of the criminals that Light killed were innocent. Also, as this series has demonstrated, if you start killing a particular group of people in a supernatural way, eventually someone will notice, and to stay away from the authorities, you will definitely have to end more innocent lives. Then you have the fact that Light doesn't just kill traditionally sentenced criminals. As far as we know, he kills most of the people whose crimes are reported on the news. So even those whose crimes cannot justify death, such as the embezzler Light kills in the series, will be punished with death, which is not advisable. However, if we go back to that old adage, the end justifies the means, what does it matter if some innocent people are burned alive if world peace dies as a result? Note that when a long time has passed and Kira has shown the world what he can do, the global crime rate will drop by 70% and all wars will end. So isn't that enough to suggest that what Light is doing is the right thing to do? Evil is not something that comes naturally one day. It is created by a bunch of different factors including education, upbringing, social status, wealth and anything else you can imagine. So while Light may be stopping crime at the moment, he hasn't fixed whatever caused people to commit this crime in the first place, and just as criminals change tactics to survive in the digital age, they also change tactics to survive in the Kira era. And the fact that crime has only been reduced by 70% is a testament to that. So then comes the problem of eliminating every other problem in the world, as just eliminating criminals obviously doesn't fix the world, and we're shown that Light realizes this when Taramikami, through Naomi Takata, tells everyone that he's going to essentially start killing lazy people so he can eliminate laziness, something that Light seems to agree with when he says to himself that Mikami is starting this part of the plan too early. And I believe that this notion proves one thing in particular, that no one human being should have this power, as the possibilities it allows is a slippery slope that will lead to horrendous abuses of that power in service to one's own personal goals or their desire to shape the world into a better place at the expense of innocent lives. Now, if Light were actually a living, breathing God, there wouldn't be much we could do or say about this situation. As what are human beings in the face of divinity? But Light isn't really a god, it's a human. And so we can say that one who holds such power over another is not only dangerous, but it is more likely than not to use that power in the way that the Light uses it. And there are several reasons for this. To better understand how we can determine this, let's first discuss how we can determine if something is true or false using an example of how we can set objective ethics. The vast majority of people watching this video now know someone they love and will protect at all costs. Whether it's a sibling, parent, child, friend, or anyone else, chances are you'll think of at least one person you never wanted to die. So with that in mind, for example, it makes sense to suggest that since I don't like someone killing my mother, other people probably don't like me killing their mother either. As in any scenario, there are exceptions, of course. But from this common ground of ethics, we can derive quasi-objective ethical foundations that we can then use to make laws. And while there are different views on morality, the different sources from which we derive our morality, such as religion, and different systems around the world deal with morality, virtue in different ways, you can see that the whole world more or less agrees that some act is objectively wrong and that the crime should be punished, even if the way these crimes are viewed and the punishments for these crimes are placed differently on the field of morality and justice. And this is true whether you believe that morality is divinely rooted or not, for what really matters is the general consensus of the majority of people about their feelings towards good and bad actions. A Hispanic person would rather not see their loved ones murdered than an Asian. A Hindu and a Christian can agree that murder is a crime and should be punished without having to convert to the other's religion. They could have handled it differently, but every government agency on the planet can agree that murder is wrong. Well, if you put 1,000 people in a room and you ask them all if it's wrong to kill, and one person says no, that doesn't mean not everyone is wrong. Agreeing that murder is wrong, and therefore saying that murder is wrong is not technically objective. But what makes it fundamentally objective is asking a simple question. Otherwise 0.1% of the population really believe that murder is not wrong. Do I really care what they think? I guess the answer to this question is no. We can therefore use examples of objective ethics to better assess whether something that can be seen as an offshoot of this ethical dilemma is objectively bad, subjectively good or bad. So, with that in mind, are Light's actions closer to objective crime or more subjective crime? With all that we've discussed so far about the implications of his plan, I believe his actions more closely resemble objective crime. However, one of the biggest challenges this series presents us with is the constant battle many people face regarding their beliefs about Light's actions. And because we can't say his results weren't positive overall, it's hard to say with certainty that what Light is doing is wrong, and your answer to this question may be very different from mine. However, based on your own beliefs, I think it becomes easier to look at this situation objectively once you consider a few things. First, most if not all of you can agree that it was wrong to kill innocents and that Light killed his fair share here. And while we can again go back to any end to justify the means argument, I've never been a fan of killing innocent people for any reason, and I hope you also. Now, I want to make it clear that there is a big difference between killing innocent people and killing innocent people because of unfortunate circumstances. For example, If 10 people drown right in front of you, and the only way to save 9 is to drown one, that is a completely different situation and a moral dilemma worth discussing. Private. What I am giving you here is that intentionally killing innocent people for the sake of a supposed greater good is not usually wrong and can even be objectively considered wrong. Like even killing innocent people is good. Who can say that this will continue and you will be able to achieve your goal by doing so? As we can see from the way the world forms under the light, it is more likely that your supposedly better things are just a pipe dream. That if it could even become a reality, it would take a lot of control over people's lives to make it happen. It doesn't matter if killing innocents produces the results you want. Ask yourself if you would be content to die for a great cause because someone else told you it would make the world a better place unless it was a divine command from a God right in front of you. I doubt you will sign up for this. It's easy to say that dozens of innocent deaths are fine for a higher purpose when you're not one of those innocent people. It's easy to say the end justifies the means when you're not part of the means. But these people are still human, and they have the same thoughts and feelings as you. So it's just as fair to sentence them to death for your idea of what's better as if they would do the same to you, just as I don't appreciate you killing my loved ones. And you won't appreciate me doing the same with yours. Again, you may always have a different approach to this concept than I do. But it's one of the main reasons why I feel like I can safely say that what Light is doing is wrong, but let's take it a step further and compare what Light does, specifically how he kills the perpetrator, with how we handle things in the real world centered on the power of the Death Note. While Light's plan poses its own problems, the existence of the Death Note era poses more problems than that. And that begs the question, if you can find the perfect person or organization to wield that power, who has the perfect plan to make the world a better place, should they been granted that right? I guess the answer to this question is yes. But the thing is, no matter how much or how little you search, you will never find the perfect match. And this is one of the reasons why the world is slowly starting to move away from the death penalty. Now, where the death penalty is available, there should be and there are restrictions specifying who can be sentenced, how the punishment is handed down, and what crimes a person must commit to be eligible for the death penalty. Death penalty, and the answers to these questions will vary from person to person. When it exists somewhere, it should be reserved for serial killers and serial killers, which seems reasonable. But even then they are the exception, not the rule. And studies increasingly show that reform is a much better policy to adopt when dealing with the majority of crime. Even if you use the death penalty with these exceptions, the problem is that you are putting life and death in the hands of the people, because what would the institution of law and order be without the people inside? They. Yes, we can base how we decide whether that particular policy is simply based on group consensus, just like other concepts we can claim to be ethical objective. But when it comes to something like the death penalty and the margin of error associated with it, its objective value is virtually non-existent. Like the problems I pointed out earlier with light sentences. Namely killing innocent people accused and deciding who deserves to be killed and who doesn't, the death penalty is not a solution. Perfect for criminal activity. As you observe how Light uses his powers, you'll see that it's not a death sentence handed down on the conclusions of the courts of his equals, but the judgment of his own. A man who made himself judge, jury, and executioner. And he often does this without knowing whether the people he kills have actually committed the crimes they have committed. And just as it is not a good thing for a government to have too much power, it is not a good thing for one person to have too much power over everyone. At the same time, giving one person ultimate power over the lives of all others inevitably limits the freedoms of others and their ability to live lives according to their free will. Subject to on how they should achieve their goals. Everything Light does as Kira in this series is bad, because it's not like he's apprehending unknown killers and bringing them to justice when the justice system has failed. It kills criminals who have been arrested and are awaiting trial or who have been convicted of the crimes they are accused of, some of whom may deserve death, but they are on their way anyway. Achieve this goal. And again, as far as we know, there could have been a lot of people accused or convicted of truly innocent crimes when Light killed people. Thus, all of his crimes fall under the category of killing innocent people for the greater good or disrupting established judicial decisions to achieve the same goal, and like I said earlier, it's not like the results he produces in doing that guarantee that the world will remain a better place than it was before he became Kira. And that becomes all the more brutal when you consider that one day Light will die. And there is no guarantee that he will be able to pass the power of the death note to the right person to continue. Imposed on him. His plans for the world. So in the end, with all of that, is Light the bad guy? No, he's not. You may be a little shocked by this answer, considering everything we've discussed throughout this video, but to claim that a person is bad, you have to prove that the actions they take are more or less consistent. Focus on their own desires. If Light kills people just to satisfy his own bloodlust, then yes, we can say he's a bad guy. But he is killing people to make the world a better place, you can say that. You could say the same thing to dictators and tyrants who claim to do what they do to make the world a better place. But I challenge you to find a single person who is not doing what it is doing for itself, or to conquer a group of people to advance the welfare of a particular group of people. Light, as Kira, resembles a dictator in many ways, but to his credit, he hasn't singled out specific criminals of a certain race or creed to assassinate. He eliminated anyone in the world he considered evil in order to make the world a better place. However, as I said earlier, his actions are still wrong for all the reasons that I have given you so far, not to mention the number of people he killed in the north was 200,000. That way, I think Light ranks better as a villain. He's still a villain, but he's a lot more like Ozymandias from the Watchmen series, a man who killed millions to end the threat of nuclear war, a man of great intentions. Good determination in the blood of innocence. Light is naive, narcissistic and extremely misguided. But Light himself isn't bad. But sometimes all you need to wreak havoc on the world is a hopeful dream and a path to getting there. And as this series has shown us, the path to utopia and glory can sometimes be shrouded in a suffocating atmosphere of death and destruction. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Analysis of Evil, and I hope you enjoy it. How do you feel about Light? Did I miss something? Let me know below and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see stand out. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content.